Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Sandeep. I'm a culture and a consciousness coach and the founder of The Conscious Way. Today, with me is Meera Chavla, and we are going to talk about something, very interesting. Is it always right to commit a mistake? Well, mistakes are a natural phenomenon. We keep doing them, we keep on saying sorry. But the larger question is, when we say sorry, do we really mean it? When we say we have committed a mistake, do we really mean it? Therefore, the question arises, is it whether it is always right to commit a mistake? Mira, your take on the subject, and I pass on the mic to you.
I will thank you, Sandeep. Thank you for having me here. Good evening to everyone. Uh, I just wanted to start with this one thing. I remember watching a movie, the most, uh, the movie which all the youngsters relate to, or actually all the age groups relate to, ZNMD, Zindagi Na Mile Dobara, in which Hrithik Roshan tells Farhan Akhtar that say sorry when you mean it and just don't use the word sorry. So a mistake something I always feel that when you say a mistake and then you say sorry, do you actually really mean it as you were saying? And does it what happens is that every time whenever you are saying, okay, I made a mistake, so what's the big deal? All right, it's not a big deal, then obviously you're not thinking about it as to what is the big deal, how is it impacting the other person. Because if you were to realize, and that talks about the empathy portion of it, that if you were to realize that your mistake is actually harming someone, it also shows that you don't have empathy. It's just not about making a mistake.
Mira, I love the phrase you use, what's the big deal? And I hear a lot of people saying, Aisa kya ho gaya? What's the big deal? Honestly, when we look beyond the mistake, actually, what is a mistake? A mistake is an action, which does not produce the results which you wanted. Okay.
Yes.
And it could have harmed someone, it could not have harmed someone, but the fact is, it is an action. Now, I believe that in case it's an involuntary action, yes, then it could be the person should say that, look, it's a mistake, it's involuntary, it's habitual, I would work on it, I'm sorry for it. And in case it is intentional, then I don't believe it's a mistake. Then it is a premeditated action, which the other person tries to pass off as a mistake. Well, you are watching the TV these days. The guys are writing, they are premeditated hangamas and rights, etc., etc., and they just come up and say, sorry, we made a mistake. I don't believe that's a mistake, Mira. What do you say?
I agree with you, Sandeep. I totally agree with you. Because to me, if you were really sorry, it means that you should have changed a change behavior next time onwards. But if you were making a mistake and then you said sorry and you went ahead and again did the same thing repeatedly, then why use the word sorry? Admit to it that you are just like that. Your value system, your behavior, the way you approach things, the way you approach people, all of it is actually you take everything for granted, is how I look at it. You don't mean a word. That also means that somewhere you do not respect other people, which is a reflection of you not respecting yourself.
A very common mistake which a lot of people do, and they do it reflexively and sometimes intentionally, is distorting facts, is telling lies, is not presenting the entire truth. Okay, How would you react to such people? How do you react because you know the other person is a compulsive liar? You know that the other person is compulsively not telling you the entire facts, though his or her telling you not the entire facts is not harming anyone. But nevertheless, the entire facts are not coming out.
And that is something so common in the corporate, Sandeep. You said such a beautiful thing. And I have seen people omitting, and I also say that it's not only about presenting the data, presenting the facts accurately, it's also choosing to say the complete thing rather than just omitting a few things here and there. And I was mentioning, as we were discussing a bit earlier before we got into the session, that the value system defines the way you want to talk about the facts, the figures, and everything. So be it in your corporate life, be it in your personal life, I think, and it's very something which I feel very close to my heart, having been a team leader for many years, that you really need to set an example by leading the right way for the teams. So even if the mistake, if the opportunity for your team to speak up or you to take that ownership, you should give that allowance to people, A, to make a mistake, B, to ensure that they do not repeat the mistake. And they actually, when they say sorry, they mean it. But the leader's value system really defines the whole. When we say that the company culture is like that, it's not about the culture of the company, it's a very intangible conversation. It's about the people who are defining the vision, the mission statements. It's the way the company is responding to people when they are making mistakes. It's the way they are looking at people who are repeatedly doing the same thing, sets the tone for the culture of the company.
Oh, that's beautiful, Veera. And excuse me. While you were talking, what was coming to my mind is a distinction between things going wrong against a considered decision and a mistake. So, the example which you gave, where there's a culture to take your decision and without bothering that it might go wrong or correct, the freedom is there. Obviously, your intention is that the things don't go wrong. But yes, for some reason they do go wrong, then I don't believe that's a mistake done by that person. It is a considered decision which went wrong. Probably in that sense, the mistake is when you intentionally do not go through the entire 9 yards. For example, you had to take a decision and you did not investigate the facts. And you know that you have not investigated the facts. And you have taken the decision on half information or half facts. Then I believe that's a mistake. And if it's a mistake, I believe it is not excusable. You can excuse the person once or twice, max 3 times. But beyond that, it's not an excusable mistake and it's not right for that person to commit that mistake repeatedly. Your thoughts?
I Something I'll share with you, which very early on, one of my supervisors told me very early on in my career, and it stood by me whenever I have taken personal and professional decisions. And it was a very simple thing that he said to me, that there was an incident in which couple of people were asked to go. It was way back, I remember, sometime in 2000 or 2001. And he told me, and I was trying to plead their case and trying to tell him that let it go this time. So here, and they were two brothers actually. So he simply said it to me that, Meera, you know what? The first time it's their mistake, second time it is yours. And Sandeep, that hit me so bad at all points. And maybe then I was not that mature, or I didn't have life experience to know that what he meant. But as I grew further on and I started taking decisions, I grew in the corporate ladder, I grew in the personal life and everything. The way I approach things, and when I had just when I thought it was getting a bit too ruthless,
Hmm.
I just remember that particular decision, that statement, and it stood with me. Having said that, there was also an intuitiveness which I have always used, uh, to know whether this person really meant it or not. Largely, whenever I have gone with that particular statement, it has benefited me rather than I have been at a loss. So I would always say that I always come up with this one sentence whenever I get emotional on certain decisions, that first time it is theirs and second time it is yours. And that really helps me out. It eases out my decision making completely.
Well, that's brilliant. First time is theirs, second time is yours. And but that's absolutely brilliant. For me, the benchmark is that whether the person owns up or not. Because, when we do something wrong, which falls in the bracket of mistake, all of us know that we have done something wrong. For example, we had to go for a meeting, and for some stupid reason, we don't go for the meeting, and there are certain repercussions of not going there. Now, I'll be having two options. One is own up, yes, I did not go for the meeting, and this was a mistake on my part. And rather saying sorry to the world, say sorry to myself and say, okay, this should not happen again. And the other alternative is that I start finding excuses. Oh, this happened, therefore I could not go. Oh, I was not well, or so and so called me, or I was expecting a call, therefore I could not go, etc., etc. Then it is not pardonable. So for me, the benchmark is whether the person owns up or not. Because personally, I believe when the person owns up, uh, in a way, the person is signaling his brain that I have committed something wrong or done something wrong which I should not have done. And owning up, makes our brain go in the direction of finding solutions. Right.
Absolutely.
So for me, owning up is very important.
I think Sandeep, you used a very lovely. This was actually a very lovely statement that you had given, and I thought that when you talk about owning up, you you owned up to it. Absolutely, that's the first thing we look for in people, is how much are they owning up to the mistake. Secondly, I would say, do they go back and introspect and see where it is? And when you use the example of a meeting, there can be various reasons when, if you don't go for a meeting. A, you genuinely had made a mistake. B, there were fears around it, you were not fully prepared. B, you were fully prepared, but you couldn't you didn't sorry, I'll just repeat that once. A, that you genuinely forgot. B is that you were half prepared, so you did not dirty your hands the way we were talking about it earlier. And B, C was that you were genuinely prepared but you were fearful. So there are three things which could have happened when you didn't go for the meeting. You have to realize that what is it that is owning up to you, is that how much do you want to admit to yourself whether you were fully prepared for it, or whether it was the fear. What was it that held you back from going for the meeting, other than the fact that it was genuinely an issue? Then of course it's very very pardonable. But if there is other second third reason, then you need to do a course correction within yourself so that it does not repeat again.
Okay, let me pose a question to you, Meera. You see, in the 1960s, in corporate America, It was established fact, or it was accepted fact, that to bluff in business is okay till the time you are following the laws of the land. As a result, uh, most of the business leaders had a dual, say, ethical system. Let's put it this way. Okay,
Yes.
speaking lies within the family was not acceptable, but speaking lies in the professional field was acceptable. Now the person is the same person. When he turns his face towards his home, he follows one particular ethical system, and when the person turns his face towards the company or business or career, he or she follows a totally contrast and a totally different ethical system. Now, in this circumstances, now this person has convinced himself or herself that this is the done thing. How would you react to it, Mira?
Uh, for me, my value system is very strong, Sandeep, on the fact when if somebody was to ask me even at 5 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, what is the value system? One of the things that I would say, a value which is very important to me is the truth. And again, to take another example of another Hindi movie, there is a scene in some movie of Ferrari where Sharman Joshi is there, and I think he crosses a traffic light. So he goes to the traffic guy and says, "Ki, please, I crossed the traffic, the red light." So he says, "Kisi ne nahi dekha, go ahead and do it, go ahead." But his son was riding behind him in the scooter, and he says, he saw it.
Hmm.
So for me, to pay the challan is very important. So I think he could have actually gone away. And when you say that if his son was not there behind, would he have done it? I always wonder. And it was a genuine mistake because, all right, somebody did not get. It was a movie, but sometimes even when we are coming back at late night or something, and there are traffic signals which are working, but yet people choose to cross them over. You get worried for that 30-second thing, that guy did not show a 30-second patience or maybe a 10-second patience, and he crossed at with full speed his vehicle, and somebody could have been hurt. And we do hear of accidents and everything like that. So had if people were to listen to it in a very very nice way, that why it is important to hold on to your value system, it would be very very different. Then you would not have two binary ways of looking things. You would only have one way of looking at it.
Well, I totally agree with you, Mira. Uh, the example which I gave of the 1960s corporate America, having two value systems simultaneously, uh, was in a way very disastrous, and it fractured the social fabric or the social value system fabric. Okay, duality came into it. So what suited you, you accepted that. What didn't suit you, you did not accept that.
Correct.
And the repercussions have been the chaos which we saw in the late 1900s in the corporate world, which ultimately culminated into all the genocides and scams and the frauds, which were committed over the years. So when you start accepting or approving something which does not correspond to the social value system or to your value system, you get into a habit of committing that mistake and justifying the mistake. And once you start justifying it, it doesn't remain a mistake in your mind. And when that happens, it has got very severe consequences on your life on the society, and the world at large. You see,
I
like two,
completely agree.
like 2008, since we are talking more of the corporate world, 2008 was what? Was primarily justification, self justification of certain companies that whatever they're doing, that is right, without realizing that they were acting out of greed.
Yes, yes. I and that's and sometimes I another value thing which I again another one of my other mentors told me very and somehow I've had some very great mentors, so I really have a lot of examples coming out from them. But one of the things which I've always learned is that there are always going to be choices as to how whether you want to make that mistake and you know the consequences of it, or whether you want to take the difficult path where you know that it's going to be tough walking down that path, but yet it's going to be more fulfilling and more refreshing.
So, what I get from you, Mira, is that you are saying that you have a choice, right? Either you take the shortcut by making a mistake, which you know
Right,
is a mistake, you should not be doing it, right?
right, right.
Or you do not do that thing and take the longer path, which might be slightly more time consuming or could be slightly more difficult. Is this what you're trying to say?
Exactly. If I could just expand that for you further, it's like the trailer of the movie, Sunny. The trailer, when you're making a mistake, the trailer is looking very enticing, and you go ahead and watch the movie. So you think, wow, this is the easy way. Your brain, everything of yours is telling you that go ahead and make that mistake. The consequences are going to be tough. Whereas if you swallow the bitter pill and you actually own up or do not make that mistake, do not take that shortcut, the route then is going to be very, very easy. Like Sir John Templeton would always say, there are no free lunches in life. And actually you need to realize that you might think that this is the easy way out, but you will have a repercussion of it. Every action has a reaction. We all have heard this statement at all times when we were growing up.
What you're saying, Mira, is right. And what was coming to my mind, there are a number of mistakes which we commit unintentionally out of force of habit. For example, there's a phone call. Your child picks up, right? You're not in the mood to answer. So you tell the child, tell the caller that dad is not at home, mom is not at home, right? Now, in a way, this is a big mistake because children tend to copy their parents. So, what are you doing? You are communicating to the child that to speak a lie is okay. Now, when we come to leaders, right? Now, in the corporate world, since the leaders they are in a position of influence, they are in a position to channelize, motivate, right? They're in the position to guide. When they make these kind of mistakes, again they send a signal that this thing which should be unacceptable is acceptable under this span. And like I always say, drops when all the drops come together, your glass gets full. Similarly, when each team member makes the same mistake, it becomes uncontrollable.
Absolutely. What happens, Sandeep, it's a very small thing, but if people, the leaders, if they were to look at it from a perspective that all of his team members or her team members are all future leaders, if they were to look at it like that, they would have a paradigm shift, because you really always wonder, as to what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind. Do you, and it's a very small thing about the conversation we are having is a is about talking about mistakes, but it's a very small, it's just a word, mistake. But it's so important for team leaders to realize that you are creating so many of the future leaders, and they further are going to be creating, it's a pyramid effect. So you really need to realize that one sentence of yours, or one act or inact or no act of yours, could lead to somebody actually forming a perception that this is the right thing to do and you can get away with it. So let's go ahead and do it. And that's where I was coming in when I mentioned earlier in the conversation that the culture of the firm is defined in such a manner.
That's right, Mira. And what I gather is okay, a leader, after considering all pros and cons, after applying himself or herself on the subject, makes a choice or takes a decision, right? In all good faith, and things don't go the way they were supposed to go, they should have gone, or they were anticipated to go, then it is not a mistake, right? It is things have gone wrong, but it will become a mistake if the person doesn't own up. It will
Correct.
become a mistake if the person doesn't introspect and tries to avoid it the next time. Now, this very person, if the action or the decision had been taken without full preparation and without full investigation or without full thinking, then yes, it was a mistake. And even owning up the mistake will not yield any sufficient results or positive results in the future, because probably the person is in the habit of not doing full investigation, not considering everything calmly, not responding but reacting.
Correct.
And I personally believe 90% of the mistakes happen when you react, you do not respond.
Yes, Sandeep. I would like to just add one more point. I think what's very important in a leader, in a corporate is, A, you give a atmosphere where people can own up to their mistakes. That is very important. That's the basic denominator. Having said that, if someone is repeatedly making mistakes, then of course you are setting an example which everyone else will follow, and you will have consequences of it. Sometimes you will have a material, or sometimes you will have immaterial consequences of it, but there is going to be a consequence.
Well, I think I totally resonate with what you said. At the same time, what I've seen and experienced, owning up is the hardest fact.
Yes,
Owning up is the hardest truth. Owning up is the hardest
absolutely.
action. Is the hardest action, right?
Yes,
And to own up, the person needs to work on himself or herself. The person needs to live by his or her values. The person
yes,
needs to be self confident, full of self esteem. And the person
absolutely.
needs to learn how to stop reacting and start responding. Because when you react, you think of the action after the action. So
Correct.
conviction might be there in the action, conviction might not be there. But when you respond, so the thought process happens before, and then you make a choice. So, in a way, you are committed to the choice, you are convinced of the choice. So, I
Yes,
think one of the ways to reduce mistakes in our life is to learn how to respond rather than react.
I couldn't have put it in a more better way than how you did it, Sandeep. I actually agree with you that you need to have the respond. That's the one thing that you take away with. Another thing is, I go at times when we say you should have the courage, go by the process of elimination as to think of the worst case scenario and then think of the consequences and then you own up to the mistake. Because when you think of the worst case scenario, it will not sound so bad when it actually happens. And it may not be really that bad. So
Uh,
sometimes I think that is very important. Yes, please go ahead.
when you think of the worst case scenario and you own it up, what happens? The other people also see your human dimension. They come out in your support and come out to help you. And if you are open to that, what happens? One plus one becomes 11. It doesn't
Yes.
remain one. You see, and a number of times we are caught up in our own vicious thinking. But the moment someone else steps in, he or she gives us a fresh perspective, which changes our thought process totally and our action mechanism totally. So, like I've always said, if faces, that is being flexible, adaptable, consistent, ener- energized, and stable, if we bring these five factors in our personality, the quantum of mistakes definitely does go down substantially, because then the element of ego, the element of I have to prove that I'm right, goes away, and you start behaving in a much more responsive manner than a reactive manner.
Completely agree with you, Sandeep, on this. I actually feel, personally, to me, owning up to mistakes is a better way to do it. It might shake you up in short term, but eventually you sleep better. And I have normally seen that whenever I have owned up to a mistake, and not that I didn't make it in my corporate career or in my personal life, but when I've owned up to it, the responses from everyone who were impacted was much more softer, much more human, as to what you were saying. And it was like, all right, raat gayi baat gayi kind of a thing, because that person, at least I think half of your job is done when you own up to your mistake, and the other half is when you have a change behavior and you do not repeat the mistake.
What you're saying, Mira, is right. I agree with you, but at the same time, you know, say you are a subordinate and your boss is one nasty person, who's always looking out for excuses to pull you up, right? So, in that
Right.
situation, a lot of people will back off from owning, right? And I won't blame them. But having said that, uh, by not owning up, it would start another cycle of what should I have done, why did I do it, self accusation, etc., etc., inside them. So, even in such circumstances, I would say owning up is a very good option, and at the same time, also accepting your boss as he or she is also very important, because the moment you tell yourself, okay, my boss has to find mistakes in me, then his or her finding mistakes or shouting at you, that intensity reduces hell of a lot, because you were expecting that. And it does not come as a surprise. It is okay. I've owned up. Now, boss, I'm waiting for you to shout at me. So,
I think it's a conversation for a different day about bosses who don't allow you to make mistakes, or who really give you, who rain on your parade when you make a mistake. But yes, I agree with you that, as I was mentioning, Sandeep, it's a Those bosses are an exception, and they anyways tell you how not to behave.
Mhm.
You still have a learning from them.
So, well, Mira, as usual, we have our sessions for 30-35 minutes. It's 35 minutes. So, your last tip for the audience, for the listeners.
I would sign this off saying that own up to it, be courageous enough, you will sleep better.
And I'll say that look, don't be a habitual mistake doer. Learn how to respond rather than react. And that will not only help you in the domain or the realm of making mistakes, it will help you in every dimension of your life, whether it's your career, whether it's your health, whether it's your relationship. It will bring about a quantum change. And obviously, the number of mistakes would go down substantially. So thank you everyone. So with this note, I'm signing we are signing off till we meet again. So thank you Mira for joining me today. Thank you everyone.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Goodbye, everyone.